Hey guys, what is up and welcome to another video. So it's already been a month since I got my hands on the new 2020 iPhone SE and I want to give you guys all the information you need to help you decide whether you should get this phone. Also, as a side note, I've actually made a few videos on this phone, including the unboxing and first impressions of this phone. And I also compared the 2020 iPhone SE with this year's iPhone SE. If you guys want to check them out, I will leave a link in the description below. Before we get into this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel and follow me on Instagram. I've got a lot of cool content on there for you guys and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Now, there are a few things I actually want to say about this device. Firstly, there is Touch ID. It's very responsive with haptic feedback and I genuinely love it. To be honest with you, this is something I actually missed on the iPhone, especially since we've been accustomed to using Face ID since the release of the iPhone X. The iPhone SE is sort of a brilliant concept. Apple have actually recognized that there's a huge market for people who are maybe on a budget, and Apple decided to take a somewhat outdated model, replace the processor with the latest one, and decided to sell it at a greatly reduced price than the flagship lines. Now that's quite genius behavior from Apple there, but there is a slight flaw. In 2016, the original iPhone SE put the latest A9 processor in the body of a 2 generations old iPhone 5S for just $399. It then took 4 years for Apple to release a second generation iPhone SE, which once again put the latest A13 processor in a 2 generations old iPhone 8, still for just $399. Now 2 years later, Apple has abandoned this winning iPhone SE formula, though it still added the latest processor, but instead of putting it in the 2 generations old iPhone 11 or even the iPhone XR, Apple is once again using the body of the ancient iPhone 8. And somehow the price went up to $429. Although this is still the least expensive new iPhone you can buy, and it's not a bad iPhone either, but it's disappointing to see Apple charge more while not advancing its budget phone in the most important ways. The A15 Bionic chip is faster than the A13 Bionic chip in the second generation iPhone SE, but whether you really notice that sort of performance in everyday use is debatable. But one thing for sure is that you know it will be future-proof in terms of the power it has. The A15 also includes a better image processor, which means it can do more with the data from those ancient iPhone 8 sensors and optics. Note that none of the camera sensors or optics are upgraded from that 5-year-old model. You have the new photographic styles feature found on the iPhone 13, along with excellent 4K video recording, Deep Fusion, and Smart HDR4 does a great job in bright outdoor scenes. You also get 5G support, but there is a catch to it because you can only connect to the sub-6 GHz 5G bands, not the new super high frequency millimeter wave bands. That's where the fastest speeds are, but note that millimeter wave is extremely short range and not all that prevalent yet, so you're not missing out on that much. One of the worst drawbacks of the second generation iPhone SE was its terrible battery life. Apple says the more power efficient A15 works with the iPhone SE's updated battery chemistry to deliver better battery life. The good news is the battery will likely last longer, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that it's still pretty bad. In my experience, I got about 6 hours on a regular day, which included taking phone calls, browsing social media, and watching YouTube videos for a few hours. I found that I had to regularly recharge in the evening to make it through the day, and to be honest, it's been a few years since I've used an iPhone that didn't reliably last all day. Although its battery life is better than the second generation iPhone SE, but I still think it's the worst battery life of any iPhone you can buy at the moment. If it could just last 30 to 40% longer, it would be ideal. With its design, I was pretty much expecting some sort of a makeover, or at least making it look a little modern. Apple have kept the same old 4.7-inch LCD display that doesn't get quite as bright as you'd hope for in the sun. It has huge bezels above and below and doesn't display HDR. For me personally, the screen size is just too small. There are some users who are just not big fans of Face ID, but even so, Apple could have put together a phone with Touch ID in the side button as it does with the iPad Air and iPad Mini, allowing more room for a much larger display that reaches further to the edges of the phone. The superior image processing of the A15 Bionic chip does a remarkable job of producing good photos in bright light, but the 12 megapixel rear camera struggles in dimly lit situations, producing images with lots of grain and poor contrast. The image quality would have been much better if Apple implemented night photography though. The 7 megapixel front camera takes worse photos with less detail and contrast and frequent problems like blown out skies and cross shadows, though it gets the job done for FaceTime calls, and I'm constantly surprised by how good this old hardware can perform in very brightly lit scenes, but you'll probably want better if you take lots of selfies. Now the real question is, should you really buy this phone? Apple still sells the iPhone 11 for $499 $299, and I think most users who are considering the iPhone SE would be happier overall spending the extra $70 for it. Though it doesn't have 5G and its A13 chip isn't quite as fast, but it has a bigger and better display, Face ID, better water resistance, higher quality cameras, and a much longer battery life. I think the 2020 version of the iPhone SE was already powerful enough and didn't really need a fast processor. What it needed was a new design, upgraded camera hardware, a modern display with a better screen to body ratio, and a better battery life. I think Apple upgraded the part that needed it least and didn't touch on any of the things that are now hopelessly out of date. The display is very tiny with huge ugly bezels, battery life is barely acceptable, and the camera hardware is incredibly dated and limiting. And while top tier image processing from the A15 really elevates your photos, you're still missing out on features like night mode. So honestly speaking, I think this is a very uneven product. The processor is overkill, way more than any budget phone needs. This sort of bleeding edge performance is rarely the top concern of people who choose the most affordable phone. In other areas it's so far behind the times, even for a phone that costs around $400. This is just my honest opinion about the phone. Although I'll still keep using it, I just know that it will be a backup phone that I will be using when travelling abroad. I hope this video was helpful for you guys, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my kind of content. I will speak to you guys soon. Take care.